get a picture of this. Don't be so dramatic. It's just cake.
Breaking tonight, the sudden passing of billionaire industrialist Arthur Whitlick at the age of 72.
That's not possible.
You wanted a show. Careful what you wish for.
Vanilla frosting drips off my chin and onto my $300 rental tuxedo, the one I saved 4 months to afford so I wouldn't embarrass Helena in front of her friends. 300 guests are laughing at me right now. Not with me, at me. I'm on my knees on the marble floor of the Grand Horizon Ballroom, half buried in the wreckage of a 5-tier birthday cake, and my wife is standing over me, laughing so hard she has to grab Sterling Drake's arm to steady herself. "Oh my God!" Helena gasps between laughs, wiping a tear from her eye. "Look at him. Look at his face. Sterling Drake, tall, tanned, wearing a watch that costs more than my yearly salary, snaps a photo on his phone before I can even sit up. Within seconds, a dozen more phones are raised. Flashes strobe across my vision. Someone near the bar shouts, "This is going straight on my story." I should be angry. I should be humiliated. And I am, both of those things. But underneath it, there's something colder and quieter. The specific, familiar ache of finally understanding something I'd been refusing to see for months. Helena didn't slip. She didn't stumble into me by accident. I watched her plant both hands flat against my chest and shove, hard, with a smile already forming on her lips, before I even hit the cake table. She'd been building up to this all night. The snide comments about my boring job, the way she introduced me to her friends as my husband, he does something with spreadsheets, instead of using my name. This wasn't an accident. This was a performance. And I was the punchline, staged for an audience of one. Sterling Drake, the man she's been texting at 1 a.m. for the past 6 weeks, thinking I don't notice, because I sleep on the far side of the bed now. "Get up," she says, still smiling, but her eyes have gone sharp, daring me to make a scene. "It's just cake, Lucas. Don't be so dramatic." I wipe frosting from my eyes with the back of my hand. My knees are soaked. My shirt is ruined. And for one long, humiliating second, I actually consider apologizing to her for existing wrong, for being wrong, for 11 years of shrinking myself down to fit into whatever shape she needed me to be that day. Then the ballroom goes dark. Not power outage dark, deliberate dark. The DJ's music cuts mid-beat. The overhead chandeliers dim to nothing. And the massive LED screens behind the stage, the ones that had been looping Helena's birthday slideshow all evening, flicker and switch over to something else entirely. A breaking news feed from the global financial network. The anchor's voice suddenly booming through speakers that were never wired to the venue's own system. Confirming reports of the sudden passing of Arthur Vance, founder and chairman of Vance Global, at the age of 71. Sources close to the family describe the death as unexpected. Financial markets are already reacting to the news, with Vance Global shares dropping in after-hours trading, pending clarity on succession. Someone near me whispers, "Wait, isn't that the guy from—" I stop breathing. The screen changes again. It's not just a news anchor anymore. It's a document, an official one, stamped, notarized, the kind of paper that changes lives. Succession filings. My grandfather's name at the top, and beneath it, in bold black letters that seem to grow larger with every second I stare at them. Sole heir, Lucas Vance. 300 people go silent at once. It's a strange kind of silence, the kind that has weight to it, that presses against your eardrums. Somewhere behind me, a champagne glass slips out of someone's hand and shatters on the marble. Helena's smile is gone. She's staring at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like she's trying to remember how words work. "Lucas," she says slowly. That can't be. "Vance," Sterling Drake repeats under his breath, like he's tasting the word and finding it bitter. As in Vance Global, as in the 40th largest company on the planet. I stay on the floor a moment longer, frosting still cooling against my collarbone, and I let myself feel it, the full, absurd weight of it. 2 hours ago I was Lucas, the quiet husband nobody bothered to learn the last name of. The man who told his wife 3 years ago that he came from a complicated family situation and never said more, because the last thing I wanted was for anyone to love me for what I might one day inherit. I'd buried that name so deep that even Helena, who'd gone through my wallet more than once looking for reasons to be suspicious of me, never found it. I stand up slowly. Cake slides off my shoulder and hits the floor with a wet, undignified slap. Nobody laughs this time. I look at Helena, really look at her, the way I haven't in months, and for the first time all night, I'm the one smiling. You wanted a show, I say quietly, just for her. Careful what you wish for. Behind me, the screen refreshes with a final line. Memorial services and corporate transition details to follow within 24 hours. My phone, forgotten in my ruined jacket pocket, is already buzzing itself off the table. 6 missed calls, all from a number I haven't answered in over a year. My grandfather's chief counsel. The frosting is still dripping down my collar as I reach for it, and somewhere in the crowd, I hear Sterling Drake say my new name for the first time like it might save him. It won't. I don't sleep that night. I spend it in a hotel suite that my grandfather's chief counsel booked for me, sight unseen, sitting on the edge of a bed I've never seen before, still smelling like vanilla frosting no matter how many times I shower it off. His name is Walter Greaves. He's been with Vance Global since before I was born, and when he walked into the ballroom last night, gray suit, gray face, grim as a funeral because he'd just come from one, he didn't shake my hand. He just looked at me, up and down, cake still drying in my hair, and said, "You look exactly like him at your age." God help us all. By 8 a.m., I'm stepping out of a black sedan in a suit that fits like it was made for me, because it was. Tailored overnight by someone Walter called at 2 a.m. and paid triple to finish by dawn. Obsidian black. No tie. My grandfather apparently never wore one either, which is one of about 4,000 facts about him I'm learning today, all at once, like drinking from a fire hose. Vance Global headquarters is 51 floors of glass and steel in the financial district, the kind of building I used to walk past on my lunch break and think, must be nice. Now security guards at the doors straighten up like soldiers when they see me. One of them says, "Good morning, Mr. Vance," and I almost turn around to see who he's talking to. I don't get far into the lobby before I hear her voice. Lucas. Lucas. Wait. Helena. Her parents are with her, all 3 of them looking like they haven't slept either, clutching coffee cups like props for a scene they're desperately trying to write on the spot. Her mother's mascara is smudged in a way that looks suspiciously rehearsed. Her father, a man who's called me the accountant to my face more than once, like it was an insult, is wearing his most sympathetic expression, the one he probably practiced in the car. It was a joke, Helena says, reaching for my arm. Lucas, baby, it was just a birthday prank. Everyone does stuff like that. You know You'd never actually what? I ask, and my voice comes out flatter than I expect. Flatter than I've ever let it get with her. Humiliate me in front of 300 people? Because you did. On purpose. I watched you do it. That's not. Her mother starts, but I'm already looking past them, at the security detail flanking the elevator bank, waiting for a signal I haven't given yet. Here's the thing about last night that I haven't said out loud, not even to Walter. Some part of me wanted her to apologize and mean it. Some part of me, even now standing in a lobby I own, wanted her to grab my hand and say I'm sorry. I was cruel. I don't care about the money. I care about you. And some smaller, more pathetic part of me was ready to believe her if she did. She doesn't say any of that. What she says instead is, "Do you know what this means for us? For the business? Lucas, this changes everything. We can finally..." And there it is. Not "I'm sorry," not "I love you," just us, immediately, instinctively, reflexively, wrapped around my new number, like she's been rehearsing that line since the moment the LED screen lit up. I turned to the head of my security team, a broad-shouldered man named Reyes, who Walter introduced to me 20 minutes ago in the car. Revoke their building access, I say, all three of them, and freeze the supplementary credit lines tied to Helena's accounts, the ones drawing off the joint account. Lucas. Helena's voice cracks, genuine shock finally breaking through the performance. You can't. That's my money. That funds my entire business. It was never your money, I say quietly. It was mine. I just never made you feel that, because I didn't want to be the kind of husband who holds money over his wife's head. I guess I should thank you. You just taught me why some people do. Her father steps forward, like he might actually try something, and Reyes moves half a step, just enough to make the message clear, without saying a word. I don't wait to see how the standoff resolves. I walk past all three of them into the elevator, and the last thing I hear before the doors close is Helena's mother hissing something about lawyers. The top floor is quieter than I expected, a long hallway of glass offices, hushed voices, people who stop talking when I pass and start again once they think I'm out of earshot. My grandfather's corner office, mine now, I have to keep reminding myself, is bigger than the apartment Helena and I share. Shared. Past tense already, apparently. In my head, if nowhere else yet. Walter is waiting for me at the desk, with a leather folder thick enough to be a phone book. "The master ledgers," he says, sliding it across. "Everything your grandfather built. Before we get into any of it, I need one decision from you. Your first order as chairman. I think about it for exactly 3 seconds. Not about revenge. Not yet. Not consciously. But about information. About finally understanding the woman I married, instead of guessing. Launch a full financial audit, I say. Top to bottom. Helena's boutique. Every account, every investor, every loan on the books. Walter's expression doesn't change, but something in his eyes does. Approval, maybe, or recognition. Like I passed a test I didn't know I was taking. "There's something else you should know first," he says, and for the first time since I met him, he hesitates. "Before you dig into her business, there's a name that keeps surfacing in the preliminary reports my team ran overnight. A co-signer on several of her recent loans. Drake, I say. No, Walter says, and slides a single printed page across the desk toward me. Someone else entirely. Someone who's been quietly funding Helena's company for the last 2 years. Under a name I don't think you're going to want to hear." I look down at the page, and for the second time in 12 hours, the ground shifts under me completely. The name on the page is Marcus Vance. I stare at it for a long moment, waiting for it to mean something. It doesn't. I've never heard the name in my life. Not from my grandfather, not from anyone. But Walter's face tells me it means plenty. "Your grandfather's younger brother's son," he says quietly. "Your second cousin. Disowned from the family 30 years ago, after he tried to force a hostile buyout of Vance Global, while your grandfather was recovering from heart surgery. Arthur cut him off completely. No shares, no inheritance, no name on the letterhead. We assumed he'd disappeared into irrelevance." Walter taps the page. "He didn't disappear. He's been quietly funding your wife's company for 2 years, routed through 3 shell entities, so it wouldn't trace back to him. Why would he fund Helena? Because a struggling boutique owner, married to Arthur Vance's unknown, disinherited grandson, is a very useful investment," Walter says. "Especially if that grandson never claims his inheritance, or dies before he can. Marcus has been positioning himself as the next best heir for years. Quietly, patiently. Helena may not even know who her real backer is. Or she may know exactly. I don't have time to sit with that thought, because that's the moment my phone buzzes with an emergency calendar alert. An urgent session called by 3 minority shareholders. Effective immediately. Boardroom. Vance Tower. I already know whose fingerprints are on it, before Walter even confirms the name. Sterling Drake. By the time I walk into the boardroom on the 4th floor, the wall-mounted screen is already playing a video. The cake, the frosting, Helena's shove edited out entirely, so it looks like I simply stumbled and fell, drunk and foolish, into my own wife's birthday cake. Someone has added captions. Someone has added a laugh track. It's cruel and it's clever, and it's obviously not something Drake put together alone in 12 hours. "Gentlemen," Drake says, standing at the head of the table like he already owns it. "I think we all have serious concerns about a man who was, 24 hours ago, completely unknown to this company, unstable enough to cause a public scene of this magnitude, suddenly being handed a $40 billion empire. I move that the board consider an emergency review of Mr. Vance's fitness to lead, pending a full psychological—" "I have something to add before you finish that motion," I say, and I don't raise my voice, because I've learned in the last 12 hours that quiet is more frightening than loud, especially to a man like Drake, who's used to being the loudest person in every room he enters. I plug the flash drive Walter handed me on the way up into the port at the head of the table. The screen flickers, replacing Drake's edited video with something far less flattering to him. A full financial dossier, pages of it. Drake Enterprises' debt structure, laid bare in red ink. 3 years ago, I say, Vance Global covertly acquired 60% of Drake Enterprises' outstanding commercial debt through a series of holding companies. My grandfather did this quietly, I'm told, because he suspected exactly this, that Mr. Drake would one day try to use his social standing to threaten this company's leadership. I look directly at Drake. As of this morning, I'm calling in that debt, in full. You have 24 hours to produce the capital, or Drake Enterprises defaults, and every asset you own becomes collateral property of Vance Global. The color drains out of Drake's face in real time. Around the table, I watch loyalties shift like tectonic plates. Board members who'd been nodding along with him 30 seconds ago, now leaning away, recalculating, doing the same math I just watched Drake fail to do out loud. "You're bluffing," Drake says, but it comes out thinner than he means it to. "Check with your CFO," I say. "I'll wait." He doesn't check with anyone. He doesn't need to. I can see it on his face. He already knows it's true, because whatever web he thought he was weaving around me last night, he never once considered that the spider might already own the whole web. But there's one more thread I need to pull, and I pull it now, watching Marcus Vance's name land in the room like a dropped glass. "There's something else," I say, and I let the pause stretch just long enough to feel uncomfortable. This board should also know that Mr. Drake's sudden interest in discrediting me isn't coming from nowhere. Someone's been financing this little campaign against me, quietly, patiently, through shell companies that trace back to a man this family disowned 30 years ago, Marcus Vance. I watch the name register on several faces around the table, older members who clearly remember exactly who that is. I don't know yet how deep that connection runs, or how much of tonight's boardroom ambush originated with him instead of you, Sterling, but I intend to find out, and when I do, I don't think you'll enjoy being the only name attached to it. Drake says nothing. For the first time since I walked in, he looks less like a predator and more like prey, who's just realized he was never hunting alone, that somewhere behind him, someone else has been pulling strings the whole time, and he was never anything more than the visible half of the plan. The vote comes 15 minutes later. Unanimous. Chairman confirmed. Drake leaves the boardroom first, phone already pressed to his ear, and I hear just enough of his voice through the closing door to catch 4 words that make my pulse spike. He knows about Marcus. Walter tries to talk me out of going to the house myself. "Send Reyes," he says. "Send legal. You don't need to be there for an eviction, Lucas, especially not today, with everything else moving." But I've spent 11 years learning to read Helena's face, and there's one conversation I need to have without a lawyer standing between us. Not because I owe her softness, but because I need to see, with my own eyes, whether she flinches when I say Marcus's name. The house sits on a hillside in Crestview Heights, the kind of neighborhood where the driveways are longer than most people's apartments. I bought it 2 years ago under a proxy name. Helena thinks it belongs to an investment group I do consulting for, which was technically true, in the sense that the investment group was a shell company controlled entirely by a trust my grandfather set up before I was even born, the same trust that's apparently been quietly protecting me from people like Marcus my whole life without my knowledge. I let myself in with my own key. The house is a mess of half-packed boxes and open drawers. Helena is on her knees in the living room, wrapping a small bronze sculpture in a bath towel, and her mother is upstairs. I can hear her moving furniture, the unmistakable sound of someone trying to hide things before an appraiser arrives. Lucas. Helena scrambles up when she sees me. Towel-wrapped sculpture still clutched to her chest like a shield. I know how this looks, but these are mine. My mother gave me this piece years before we even... It's in the trust inventory, I say, not unkindly, just factually. Everything in this house is... The property, the art, the cars in the garage, all of it was purchased before our wedding and placed in a trust that predates our marriage by 4 years. None of it is community property, Helena. None of it is yours. She sets the sculpture down slowly, like the fight has finally gone out of her hands, if not out of her voice. You did this on purpose, she says. You bought this house under a fake name so that if we ever divorced, I'd get nothing. I bought this house because my family has been targeted by people pretending to love us for 30 years, I say. I just didn't understand until this morning how close that history was standing next to me the whole time. Something shifts in her face. A flicker, gone almost before I catch it. But I've spent 11 years cataloging every one of her expressions, and I know a guilty one when I see it. What does that mean? She says, too carefully. Marcus Vance, I say, and watch. Her hand goes still on the towel, just for a half second, but it's enough. I don't know who that is. He's been funding your boutique for 2 years, I say, through 3 shell companies designed specifically so you'd never have to ask his name. Did you never wonder why an unknown investor was so eager to bankroll a struggling business with no track record? Did you ever ask? She stops. Starts again. There was a man, years ago, before we married actually. He approached me at a Fashion Week event, said he'd heard about my designs, offered to introduce me to investors. I never met him more than that once. Everything after that went through an assistant, an email address, wire transfers. I swear to you, Lucas, I never knew his name was Vance. I want to believe her. That's the part that makes this so much harder than simple anger. Some pathetic, stubborn corner of me still wants her innocent, still wants this whole marriage to have been real, even for a minute, even if just at the very beginning. He knew who I was before I did, I say quietly. He spent 30 years waiting for my grandfather to die, positioning himself as the last credible Vance if I never claimed the name. And somehow, out of every boutique owner in the city, he chose to fund yours. That's not a coincidence, Helena. That's a plan. The only question is whether you were the target of it or a willing part of it. She doesn't answer that, which is, in its own way, an answer. Her mother appears at the top of the stairs, holding a jewelry box that very clearly does not belong to her, and freezes when she sees me looking up at her. I hand Helena the eviction notice, 30 days, court-backed, along with a full inventory list Walter's team compiled overnight, every item cross-referenced against trust records. 2 hours, I say. 1 suitcase, personal clothing only. Security will supervise. The locks change tonight. 2 hours? Her voice cracks. Genuine this time, not performed. Lucas, please, whatever's happening with Marcus, whatever he's done, I need you to believe I didn't know. I don't need you to convince me right now, I say, and I mean it as gently as the words will allow, which isn't very gently at all. I need you to pack. What you knew or didn't know, we'll find out in court, with records, not with tears in a living room. That's not cruelty, Helena. That's just what happens when the truth finally has receipts. I leave her standing there, towel-wrapped sculpture forgotten at her feet, and as I walk back down the long driveway toward the car, my phone buzzes with an email from Walter's forensic team, a name flagged in Marcus Vance's shell company records, a name I don't recognize yet, but will, very soon, wish I never had to. The name from Walter's email turns out to belong to a man I meet 3 days later across a courtroom table, and by then, it's too late for the surprise to do me any real good, except as leverage. Family law court is smaller than I expected, tucked into a beige government building in the suburbs, nothing like the glass towers I've spent the last 2 weeks living in. Helena sits across from me at the mediation table, thinner than she was at the gala, her lawyer whispering into her ear before proceedings even begin. Her lawyer's name is Preston Voss, and according to Walter's forensic team, Preston Voss has received 4 separate wire transfers from one of Marcus Vance's shell companies over the past 18 months. I don't say anything about it yet. I let him talk first. My client, Voss says, standing with the confidence of a man who thinks he's holding better cards than he actually is, entered this marriage in good faith, unaware that her husband was concealing a multi-billion-dollar inheritance under an assumed identity. We're arguing that Mr. Vance's deliberate concealment constitutes fraudulent misrepresentation of marital circumstances, entitling Mrs. Vance to 50% of all assets acquired during the marriage, including any assets whose true value was hidden from her. It's a clever argument, honestly. If I'd walked in here without Walter's overnight work, it might have even scared me. Before we respond to that, my lawyer says, sliding a folder across the table, we'd like the court to review some records that came to our attention this week. Bank statements, wire transfer logs, and audio. Voss's confidence flickers for the first time. The audio plays through a small speaker at the center of the table, grainy but clear enough. Helena's voice, recorded 2 weeks before the gala, talking to Sterling Drake on a call neither of them knew was being logged as part of the routine security monitoring on Helena's business accounts, put in place months ago by an assistant who, it turns out, reported quietly to my grandfather's private security office the entire time, long before I ever knew I needed protecting. If the boutique folds before the gala, I lose everything, Sterling. You said the investor would cover the gap. He will, but you need to move faster on the joint accounts. Lucas doesn't check them, does he? No. God, no. He trusts me completely. It's actually kind of sad. Good. Move what you can before the quarter closes. We'll sort out the rest after. The recording ends. Nobody in the room speaks for a long moment. Helena's face has gone the color of paper. That's taken out of context. That's not what it sounds like. There's also this, my lawyer continues, unmoved, laying a stack of bank statements on the table. Records showing 11 transfers from a joint account, held by Mr. and Mrs. Vance, into an account controlled by Drake Enterprises, totaling just under $400,000, all occurring within the 6 weeks prior to the gala. We believe this money was used to prop up Mrs. Vance's failing business while simultaneously funding Mr. Drake's campaign to discredit my client publicly and professionally. I watch Preston Voss's face carefully now, and I finally say the thing I've been holding back since I sat down. Perhaps Mr. Voss can explain, I say, why a lawyer representing my wife's interests has received 4 wire transfers over the last 18 months, from a shell entity controlled by Marcus Vance, the same man who's been secretly financing both Drake's campaign against me and Helena's business. It seems like an unusual coincidence, unless it isn't a coincidence at all. The room goes very quiet. Voss's mouth opens, closes. For a man who walked in here 30 minutes ago radiating confidence, he suddenly looks like someone doing very fast, very unpleasant arithmetic. I'll need to confer with my client, he says finally, voice tight. But it's too late for conferring. The judge has already glanced at the folder, at the transfer records, at the recording transcript now sitting on her desk. and I watch her expression shift from procedural boredom into something much more alert. "Mrs. Vance," the judge says, "given what's just been entered into record, I'd strongly advise you to reconsider any claims to marital assets before this moves further. What's on this table isn't a fraud case against your husband. It's the beginning of one against you, and possibly your legal counsel." Helena turns to look at Voss, and for the first time, I watch her realize that the man supposedly protecting her interests was never actually working for her at all, that she was, in her own way, exactly what I was to her at the gala, a useful piece on someone else's board. "I didn't know," she says, quiet now, all the performance drained out of her voice, "about Marcus, about any of it being connected like this. I swear to you, Lucas, I only ever wanted the money for the business." "I believe you didn't know who Marcus was," I say. "And I do, mostly. I don't believe you didn't know you were stealing from me." Voss leans over and whispers something urgent into her ear. Whatever he says, her face crumples, and 30 seconds later, in a voice barely above a whisper, she tells the judge she's withdrawing all financial claims to the Vance estate, effective immediately, before this goes any further. It's over faster than I expected. Too fast, maybe, because as court adjourns and Helena is led out by a lawyer who now has far bigger problems than her divorce, my phone buzzes with an alert from Walter's security team. Someone tried to access the Vance Global mainframe 40 minutes ago, using a set of credentials that were deactivated the day my grandfather died. The login attempt traces back to an IP address inside our own headquarters. The credentials belong to my grandfather's old executive assistant, a woman named Priya Chandrasekaran, who technically resigned the week after his funeral, citing grief, and who technically still had building access because nobody thought to revoke it in the chaos of the last 2 weeks. Walter finds her within the hour, not fleeing the country, but sitting quietly in a corner booth at a coffee shop, 3 blocks from headquarters, laptop open, waiting like she wanted to be found. "I wasn't trying to steal anything," she tells me, when I sit down across from her myself, against Walter's strong advice. Up close, she looks exhausted in a way that has nothing to do with grief. "I was trying to warn you. I just didn't know how, without proof, without sounding insane. Marcus has had people inside this company for years, Lucas, quietly, patiently. I used my old login because I knew if I called and said, 'Marcus Vance is planning something,' nobody would take it seriously. I needed evidence first." She slides her laptop across the table, shipping manifests, customs paperwork, a cargo route from our largest overseas supplier, flagged with irregular authorization codes that don't match anyone currently employed by Vance Global's logistics division. "There's a shipment due into port tonight," she says. $200 million in components for the new manufacturing contract you're closing this quarter. If it's delayed past midnight, you miss the customs window before the earnings call tomorrow morning, and the stock takes a hit right when the market's already nervous about succession stability. It's not random. Someone's been paying off dock supervisors for the last week to make sure that shipment gets held up on a technicality. Drake, I say, Drake doesn't have the patience or the money left for something this coordinated, Priya says. Not since you called in his debt. This has Marcus's fingerprints on it. He's been trying to crash Vance Global stock long enough to force an emergency board vote on leadership stability. If the company looks unstable enough, unproven enough, under a chairman who's been in the seat for 2 weeks, some of those older board members might start listening to a familiar Vance name again, disowned or not. I don't waste time deciding whether to trust her. I call Reyes from the car on the way to the Harbor District, and by 11 p.m. I'm standing at the edge of Port Logistics Center, with Federal Port Authority officers and 24 local police, watching a shipping crane frozen mid-lift under floodlights that turn the whole harbor a flat, sterile white. We find them fast. 2 dock managers and a customs coordinator huddled in a site office over paperwork that's been quietly falsified for a week. Backdated authorization forms designed to make it look like the shipment failed inspection on legitimate grounds. One of them, a younger man who looks more relieved than scared when the officers walk in, doesn't even try to run. "I didn't know it was this big," he says, hands raised before anyone even asks. "They told me it was a customs technicality, a favor, $10,000 to slow walk some paperwork." Nobody said federal fraud. Nobody said Vance Global by name, not until tonight. "Who paid you?" I ask. He hesitates, glancing at the officer beside him, calculating exactly how much trouble silence is worth compared to cooperation. A man who called himself a consultant, never gave a real name, wired the payment through some company I'd never heard of. But there was one thing. He stops. "What?" "He mentioned you specifically. Said if the shipment held past midnight, the timing would send exactly the right message to the board before the earnings call. Said his employer had been waiting a long time to send that message." It's not a confession with Marcus's name attached. Not directly. Not yet. Walter's already warning me on the phone that we'll need much more than second-hand testimony from a bribed dock worker to move against a man who spent 30 years learning how to stay one legal step removed from everything he touches. But it's enough. Enough to link this attempt cleanly to the same pattern: Drake's boardroom ambush, the shell companies funding Helena, now this. 3 separate attacks, 3 separate fronts, all converging on the same 12-day window since my grandfather's death, all bearing the same invisible signature. The federal officers make their arrests before midnight, dragging the falsified manifests into evidence, and the shipment clears customs with 40 minutes to spare, before the deadline that would have spooked the market. By the time I get the confirmation call from our logistics director, cargo released, quarterly numbers intact, the sun isn't even close to rising yet, but I already feel like I've lived through an entire week since court adjourned this morning. Priya is waiting for me back at headquarters when I return, still in the same corner booth 2 hours later, having refused to leave until she knew the shipment cleared. "There's something else," she says quietly, when I sit down across from her again. Something I didn't want to say in front of Walter, because I'm not completely sure of it yet. But I think Marcus isn't working alone the way you think he is. I think there's someone inside your own family circle helping him. Someone with access nobody would ever suspect. "Who?" I say, and something in my chest goes cold before she even answers, because I already have a terrible, half-formed guess of my own. Priya hesitates, glancing toward the window, toward the dark shape of Vance Tower, rising against the pre-dawn sky. "Walter," she says. "I don't sleep on it. I can't." Priya's 4 words sit in my chest like a stone for the rest of that night. And by sunrise, I've done the one thing I promised myself I wouldn't do again: jump to conclusions about someone before I have proof. So I get proof. I don't confront Walter directly. Instead, I ask Priya to quietly pull every access log tied to his credentials over the past 2 weeks, cross-referenced against the shell company transfers, the boardroom video leak, the port authorization codes. By mid-morning, the picture that comes back isn't the one I feared. Walter's login was used the night of the port sabotage, but not by him. It was used remotely, from an IP address inside our own building, at 2 a.m., an hour Walter was verifiably at home, video confirmed by his building's front desk camera. Someone borrowed his credentials the same way Priya borrowed hers, except this person wasn't trying to warn me. They were trying to make sure that if anyone ever traced the sabotage back through the company's internal systems, the trail would end at my grandfather's most trusted advisor instead of the real source. "Someone's setting Walter up," Priya tells me, relief and alarm fighting for space on her face. Which means whoever's actually behind this still has active access inside Vance Global. This isn't over, just because the shipment cleared. It's a thread I can't fully pull yet. Walter's cleared, but the real mole is still loose somewhere in the building, and chasing that ghost has to wait, because at 9 a.m. sharp, Helena is due at my lawyer's midtown office for the final settlement, and some fights have to happen one at a time. She looks different when she walks in. Gone are the designer labels, the effortless polish she wore, like armor for 11 years. She's in plain clothes, tired around the eyes, and when she sits down across the mahogany table from me, there's none of the fire from the gala left in her at all. My boutique's gone, she says, before her lawyer. A new one, court-appointed after Voss withdrew under his own mounting legal troubles, can even open the folder in front of him. You probably already know that. Turns out, a business built on someone else's money doesn't survive very long once the money disappears. I do know. I've known for 2 days. Marcus's shell companies pulled every dollar of funding the moment the fraud investigation into Voss became public, abandoning Helena the instant she stopped being useful, which tells me more about the kind of man Marcus is than any forensic report Walter's team has produced so far. I'm not here to gloat, I say, and I mean it. Whatever satisfaction I imagined feeling at this table, sitting across from her stripped of everything she thought mattered, isn't what I actually feel. Mostly I just feel tired, and a little sad, in the specific way you feel sad about something that's already over and was probably never quite real to begin with. My lawyer slides the settlement across the table. The terms are simple, he says. Complete waiver of all marital claims, a binding non-disclosure agreement covering the marriage, the divorce, and any information related to Vance Global. In exchange, Mr. Vance is prepared to instruct the district attorney's office to decline pursuing the fraud charges related to the joint account transfers, provided full restitution is made within 90 days. No alimony, Helena says quietly. Not a question, a statement, already understood. No alimony, I confirm. She's quiet for a long moment, staring at the paper without reading it, like she already knows every line by heart, because there was never really another option once the recording played in that courtroom. You could have buried me completely, she says finally. Press the fraud charges. Let me go to prison. Instead, you're giving me a way out. I thought about it, I admit, and it's true. For one dark hour, 2 nights ago, I let myself imagine exactly that. Imagine the satisfaction of watching her led out in handcuffs, the way Voss nearly was. But I didn't marry you because I wanted to destroy you eventually. I married you because for a while, I actually believed we loved each other. Even if I was wrong about most of it, I don't think I was wrong about all of it. This isn't mercy, Helena. It's just the last honest thing I can do for the person I used to think you were. Her hand shakes when she picks up the pen. She signs slowly, page after page, and when she reaches the last line, she pauses, pen hovering, and looks up at me one final time. For what it's worth, she says, voice barely above a whisper, I really am sorry. Not because of how it turned out, because of who I let myself become to get there. I don't answer that. There's nothing left to say that the signature on the page hasn't already said better. She finishes signing, stands, and walks out of the office without looking back, and through the window, I watch her get into a car that isn't hers anymore, headed toward a life that's about to be very different from the one she spent 11 years building around my name. My phone buzzes the moment the door closes behind her. Priya again. Found something. The mole isn't in logistics or legal. It's someone in investor relations. Someone who's had direct calendar access to every private meeting you've held since the gala. Come to the office. You need to see this yourself. The mole's name is Adrian Cole, and when Priya shows me his employee file on the office monitor, my first reaction isn't anger. It's disbelief, because Adrian Cole has worked in investor relations for 6 years, has a photo of his kids taped to his monitor, and personally walked me through onboarding paperwork my first week as chairman, with what looked, at the time, like genuine warmth. Calendar access logs, Priya says, pulling up a timeline. Every private meeting since the gala, legal strategy sessions, the Drake debt call-in, the port sabotage response, even this morning's settlement with Helena. Adrian's login pinged the shared calendar system within minutes of each one being scheduled. And this, she pulls up a financial record, a small offshore account flagged 3 weeks ago and only now cross-referenced, shows 2 payments totaling $80,000 from a shell entity we've already traced to Marcus. I don't confront Adrian myself. Walter insists on handling it properly this time. Quiet suspension, pending investigation, security escort, no scene, no cake table humiliation for a man who, whatever he's done, has 2 kids and a mortgage and made what Walter calls a survivable mistake in an unsurvivable amount of debt. I let Walter's judgment stand. There's been enough public spectacle around this family for 1 month. But Marcus Vance himself remains untouchable. Every thread leading back to him wrapped in enough legal insulation that Walter says building an actual case could take months, maybe longer. For now, all I can do is close the doors he's been slipping through, one by one, and wait for him to make a mistake big enough to stick. Which is exactly the frame of mind I'm in 2 months after the gala, when I step onto the stage at the Capital City Tech Summit in front of 3,000 investors, journalists, and enough international press credentials to fill a small stadium. I almost didn't come. Walter argued I should send a spokesperson instead, let the quarter's strong numbers speak for themselves, avoid giving anyone a stage to ask about the video that's still circulating online. 12 million views now. The clip of me hitting that cake table forever frozen somewhere on the internet, captioned and recaptioned 1,000 different ways by people who have no idea what actually happened that night. But hiding from it felt like exactly the wrong instinct. If there's one thing I've learned in 60 days as chairman of a $40 billion company, it's that the moment you look like you're afraid of your own story, other people start writing it for you. The keynote goes smoothly for 40 minutes. Market strategy, the new manufacturing contract, quarterly growth numbers that have Vance Global stock at its highest point in company history. Then, during the press Q&A, a reporter near the front, tabloid credentials, not financial press, raises her hand with a smile I recognize immediately as a trap. "Mr. Vance, there's a video that's gone viral of you at your ex-wife's birthday party, being shoved into a cake moments before the world learned who you actually were. Some people are calling it the most embarrassing corporate origin story in a decade. Care to comment on how that image squares with the man standing on this stage today?" A ripple of laughter moves through part of the crowd, not unkind exactly, just the reflexive laugh of people who don't yet know whether it's safe to laugh. I let the moment sit for a second longer than comfortable, and then I do something I hadn't planned to do until the words are already leaving my mouth. "It squares perfectly," I say, "because that video is the most honest thing anyone will ever see of me. I wasn't acting that night. I wasn't managing a brand. I was just a man who'd spent 11 years trying to be small enough not to threaten anyone, humiliated in front of 300 people by someone I trusted completely." I pause. And an hour later, I found out I was the sole heir to one of the largest companies on earth. If you want to know what actually changed me, it wasn't the inheritance. It was watching, in real time, exactly how little I actually meant to the people standing closest to me, and deciding, right there on that floor, that I was done shrinking for anyone. The room has gone quiet in a different way now, not amused, listening. So yes, I continue, hitting rock bottom publicly, on camera, in front of the whole world, turned out to be the exact moment I decided to rebuild this company, and my own life, with total transparency, starting today. Which is why I'm announcing a $1 billion initiative, fully independent from Vance Global's existing venture arm, to fund early-stage tech startups founded by people the industry has historically underestimated, people other rooms laughed at, before they had any reason to believe those people mattered. The applause that follows isn't polite applause. It's the real thing, sudden and building, and by the time I walk off stage, the cake video is trending again, except this time underneath a headline calling it the origin story of the year. Walter meets me backstage, phone already in hand, face unreadable, in a way I've learned means something big. "Stock's up 6% since you started talking," he says. But that's not why I'm here. He turns the phone toward me. A news alert, breaking within the last 10 minutes. Marcus Vance just filed an emergency petition in probate court. He's contesting your grandfather's will entirely, claiming Arthur was not of sound mind when he signed the succession papers, naming you as sole heir. The petition turns out to be Marcus's last real move, and in hindsight, it's also his worst one, because contesting a dead man's soundness of mind means dragging every piece of evidence about why my grandfather made his decisions into open court, and evidence, as I've learned this year, is the one thing Marcus never planned on facing directly. The hearing takes 3 weeks. Walter builds the case with a kind of quiet, methodical fury I haven't seen in him before. Like he's been waiting 30 years for someone to finally hold Marcus accountable and isn't about to waste the chance. He brings in my grandfather's personal physician, who testifies that Arthur Vance was sharp enough 2 days before his death to correct his own cardiologist on a medication dosage. He brings in the notary who witnessed the succession papers, unshakable under cross-examination. And he brings in something Marcus clearly never expected. A sealed letter, filed with the will itself, that my grandfather wrote and left with instructions to open only if his succession was ever formally contested. The judge reads it aloud in open court. I hear my grandfather's voice for the first time in my life through someone else's mouth, and it's strange, hearing a stranger explain me to a courtroom. If you are hearing this letter read aloud, it means my nephew Marcus has done exactly what I always suspected he would eventually try. I want the record to state clearly. I have watched my grandson Lucas from a distance for years, without his knowledge, because I wanted to know the kind of man he'd become, without my name shaping him. What I found was someone quiet, honest, and unafraid to work for what he has, which is more than I can say for anyone else who shares my blood. I chose him because he is exactly the kind of man who will never need this company more than the people it serves. Marcus, if you're listening to this instead of him, I want you to know that I always knew. Every transfer, every shell company, every attempt to buy your way back into a family that decided, 30 years ago, it was better off without you. This is not an accident of estate planning. This is my final answer. Marcus isn't in the courtroom to hear it read. His lawyers withdraw the petition less than an hour later, and by the following week, federal investigators, following threads Walter's team had been quietly feeding them for months, file the first of what will eventually become a long list of charges: wire fraud, conspiracy, witness tampering tied to Adrian Cole's payments. Marcus is arrested trying to board a private flight out of the country, and the story leads every financial news broadcast for a full news cycle, which feels, in a strange way, like a kind of justice. The same screens that once broadcast my humiliation, now broadcasting his downfall. 90 days after the gala, I stand on the balcony of my grandfather's countryside estate, coffee in hand, watching the sun come up over a valley that will, apparently, belong to me for the rest of my life. It's quieter out here than the city, quieter than I expected a billionaire's life to ever be, and some mornings I still catch myself waiting for someone to walk in and tell me it was all a mistake, that the papers were wrong, that I'm still just Lucas from accounting who married the wrong woman and never learned how to say no to her. My chief of staff, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Enos, who Walter hired away from a rival firm 2 months ago, appears at the door with the morning briefing folder before I even turn around. Drake Enterprises formally dissolved yesterday, she says. Assets fully absorbed. Marcus's trial date is set for spring. Federal prosecutors are confident, and Helena's relocated out of state. Small town, low profile. Her restitution payments are on schedule. She pauses. Vance Global stock closed at an all-time high yesterday. Third record close this month. I nod. Take it in the way I've learned to take everything in now. Carefully, without letting any single piece of news carry too much weight. Because I've learned this year that fortunes and reputations can turn in a single night, for better or worse, and the only thing that actually matters is staying steady through both directions. One more thing, Ines adds, and something in her voice makes me turn fully toward her. Adrian Cole's attorney reached out. He wants to testify against Marcus in exchange for a reduced sentence. Says he has documentation going back further than we realized, proof Marcus was planning this the moment your grandfather's health started declining, years before the gala. Years. Which means the night Helena shoved me into that cake wasn't the beginning of anything at all. It was just the moment the story finally became visible to me. A story that had been unfolding in the shadows for far longer than I knew, with more people watching, waiting, and calculating than I ever imagined possible, for a man who used to think nobody in the world was paying attention to him. I think about that a long time, standing on the balcony, watching the light spread slowly across the valley below. Approve it, I say finally. Let him testify. Ines nods and turns to leave, and I stay where I am a moment longer, coffee cooling in my hand, thinking about a version of myself who existed exactly 90 days ago, a man on his knees on a marble floor, frosting dripping down his collar, certain that moment was the worst of his life. He had no idea it was the beginning of the only life that was ever actually his.